Alright, so here we are again, another video lesson. Today is about, so we're still talking about Jefferson. It's a Louisiana Purchase and the core discovery. So, you're going to be able to explain the importance of the Louisiana Purchase and the expeditions of the core discovery. So we're going to talk about all those things. We're going to talk about Sacagawea and all those things like that. So, keep in mind, why does Thomas Jefferson struggle with this purchase? We're going to get into all that stuff. So, let's get to our first key point. Thomas Jefferson, President, purchases Louisiana Territory from France for $15 million, doubles the size of the United States. That's what it looks like. So, why, how, what? Well, let's get into why, how, what. So, why the purchase? A couple of reasons. As far as the France side goes, currently during this time in France, Napoleon is the emperor. He's in charge. He's the boss. And he's fighting wars in Europe. And he's a little too busy with fighting wars in Europe to worry about colonizing. In fact, France from the beginning was never 100% in the colonies game. And they definitely don't want to be in it now. They're too busy in the war game. So, sorry about that, Bell. He is willing and wants to sell that territory for a reasonably good, and I would argue really cheap price, especially for the time, right? $15 million, I think it's something over 800,000 miles of land. He gets it like 30 cents an acre, 30 cents a mile, something to that effect. So, there's that angle of it just being a really good deal because France doesn't really want it, and America's willing to buy it, and they're willing to sell it. And on top of that, there's a little piece of like the French kind of like Jefferson. Now, there's another thing happened. So there's a thing called the Pinckney Treaty that was between the U.S. and Spain. And it defines the borders of Florida. I was going to say France. It defines the borders of Florida. And it also sets up and establishes and guarantees Americans the rights to navigate the Mississippi River. It does this by just basically the French are in control and they're allowed to, or the Spanish are in control and they just allow, like they see an American, they're like, hey American, you can come onto the river. And the Mississippi River is crucial to farmers and Americans alike in order to get their goods out to sea and get them across the country. So the Port of New Orleans is super important. When this treaty expires, though, that territory is given back to France. And Jefferson's dream of the American farmer, the agriculture, needs access to the Mississippi River. So that's another part of it. Now, Jefferson buys it, and there's a problem. And the problem is he's a strict interpretation of the Constitution, right? He's a strict constructionalist, which means if it doesn't say you can do it, Jefferson doesn't believe that it should be done by a president. He likes limited federal power. He likes limited power of the president. Why is Jefferson okay with this purchase? There's a bunch of reasons. It's too good of a deal to pass up, and he's too smart of a guy to pass it up. He's not going to let something like his beliefs pass up a great idea. He's not going to do that. Also, it's not so much that his beliefs change as much as the reality makes him change. When he's in the power, he'll use the power of the president more than Adams or Washington ever did, and those guys were Federalists, right? Even though Washington didn't call himself Federalist, they're Federalists. But if one of those guys or somebody else was in power, would he have been mad about this? Oh, absolutely, right? I'd like to think he would be. I wonder what you guys think. So just keep that in mind. His strict beliefs contradict his actions here and in other places, but especially here. So just keep that in mind as we move forward into the second key point. So, after making this purchase, Jefferson needs to send a group of men, known as the Corps of Discovery, to explore. I shouldn't say group of men, because they were mostly men, but there was a woman among them. So, they're there to explore the land and report back what they find. That's what the Corps of Discovery is there for. So let's talk about the land. This territory has never been seen by Americans or by British people. And the amount of French fur trappers who are there is so small that you might as well have said no Europeans or Americans have seen this territory. It is exclusively inhabited by natives, and natives live there, living their best life, and there are no Americans there. No one's seen it. No one knows what's out there. As far as Jefferson knows, there could be dinosaurs out there. There could be all sorts of nonsense out there. The closest I can attribute it to would be the equivalent of like trying to figure out what's on other planets in space that we haven't visited. Except this isn't space, it's in territory right next to the United States, right? This is all the United States, and that this is new. So it's crazy stuff, crazy times. So let's go into the people that get the job. You got Meriwether Lewis, who was secretary to President Jefferson, which is part of why he will have this job. He's the guy who recruits William Clark, and he shares command with Clark. Now, Clark was the soldier. He fought at the Battle of Fallen Timbers. He had retired. He was doing his own thing, and he gets this offer, and he takes it. So these are your two leaders, the soldier and the surveyor, if you will. Lewis is the guy that keeps the journals, the really important detailed journals for the trip. And there is a third person who they meet along the way very early on, who will be another leader among the group, and that is Sacagawea. Now, before I get into talking about her, something important to mention now. The core discovery, when they leave the United States, when they leave U.S. territory, they become, there's no law governing them. And because there are no laws governing them, all 50 members essentially become equal. They get their own equal votes and say in what happens. This is true for York, who was an African American there. It is true for Sacagawea, who was a woman. And it is true for everybody else in the trip. They each get their own vote and their own say, and everybody's kind of respected and treated well. It's a very unique circumstance in the United States. In the U.S., York, who was an African American, was considered one of Clark's slaves. But here, out there, he's an equal member of the group and becomes a very prominent member of the group while they're out there. Now, so early in their journey, they come across a French fur trapper and his wife, who's a Shoshone native, and they join in the Corps. And very quickly, Sacagawea, this fur trapper's wife initially, becomes a prominent member of the group, a leader, because she's their guide. First of all, she shows them where to go. She's a translator, interpreter, and her very presence allows negotiations that wouldn't have been able to take place before among the natives that they're going to encounter. And she is the reason these guys survive. I don't say that lightly, I really do mean it. The chances of the Corps of Discovery completing their journey without Sacagawea there, almost zero. And we know that because there's a few instances where they would have almost died without her saving them. Countless individual members. She saves the journals for the entire trip that we're encountering it, recording that. She saves those out of a boat that had topsided. She saves multiple members. She's there to like decide what, like sometimes somebody will be like mid about to eat something. She's like, don't eat that, that'll kill you, that's poison. Eat this instead, like things like that she helped. She helped them find resources. She helped them negotiate with natives. But on top of that, even the ones they didn't negotiate with, that they never saw, her presence in that group, because she was a woman and then she has a child. When they meet her, she's pregnant. She has a child very early on in this journey. The presence of a female and a child with this group of explorers told natives that this group was not a war party. They weren't intending to do harm. That they were there to just travel, which is, to be fair, what they're doing then. Later on, the groups that mean harm and intend harm will come. But initially, her presence keeps these people alive. Just her very presence, just being there. Oh, this isn't a war party. They have a woman, they have a child. So that's something to keep in mind. So, the Corps is about 50 members, including Sacagawea, including her son, John Baptiste, who will be there later. And they are tasked with exploring and looking over the territory. They use a lot of boats to travel up rivers. They had a dog. The dog was there. His name was Seaman. And he was kind of like he was reported there. Apparently that breed is very good swimmers. He's reported to have saved multiple members of the party. He was like their watchdog at night. Apparently he tried to attack a bear and they had to kind of, like, he chased it away. Stuff like that. He was a very good boy. And his collar is out inscribed in some museum somewhere. So The core discovery, their trip takes 2 years, so write this down, right? The purchase was made in 1803. So write these dates down. Louisiana Purchase, 1803. Louisiana Purchase, 1803. Core Discovery's journey went from 1804 to 1806. Core Discovery's journey went from 1804 to 1806. So now we're going to move on. Take a picture of this slide, of this trip, this journey, right? That red line of the Lewis and Clark journey. This is the 2-year journey that they went through. They go past through Louisiana, past the Rockies, and up through to St. Louis again eventually. So just keep this in mind. And this is such a long trip. A lot of people thought these guys died. They really, really did. And they make it back, and it's kind of a shock to everybody. So just keep that in mind. Now we're going to change gears a little bit and talk about one more Jefferson issue that I probably should have had in the last video, but I didn't. And I kind of regret it, so let's talk about it now. The Barbary Pirates and what Jefferson does. So the Barbary Pirates are a group in northern Africa, a couple of little nations like Tripoli and stuff, Tangiers, that would attack ships that came through here if the ships didn't pay them like a bribe, essentially. And the way Washington and Adams dealt with this as presidents is they paid the bribe. They paid the price so that way they could move through and not be bothered on the way to go get spices in Asia. When Jefferson takes office, he refuses to pay this bribe. So therefore, some of these states declare war. It's not a real war. The U.S. doesn't declare war, but these states decide to start attacking American vessels. Jefferson will send the Navy, which is not much of a Navy at all, and he will build up the Navy as a result. Eventually, by 1805, this dies over, but for the first couple of years of his presidency, Jefferson is increasing military spending and increasing the size of the Navy. Again, exercising more federal power than Adams or Washington ever did. It's just something to keep in mind. It's something you need to get down. And that is it for this lesson. Tomorrow we will talk about James Madison and the War of 1812 and keep moving on through this early era. Thank you for watching. If you guys need anything, let me know. Have a good one.